The first one we looked at for observed objects was extensive objects, and we only did 2 of the 4 because the other 2 require a lot more time than we have, but they're interesting, so if you want to read them, please read them. The next observed object is the objects for purifying behavior, and it's very much related to the meditation we just did. So, are there questions about the meditation we just did? Or places you found interesting or got stuck? Yes.
Yeah, of course. We meditated on attachment, and I could recognize it and analyze it. When you said, okay, now we'll be single pointed, I didn't know what to focus on.
That's the new piece. Yeah, that's the new piece that we don't usually do as often. And it's kind of like all of your analysis comes down to, that is true, stay there. And if it doesn't feel like that is true, stay there, then you open it back to analysis again. And it's kind of like it probably happens so far spontaneously, and you haven't orchestrated it yet. But probably in meditations before, you're analyzing, and then at some point part of you goes, oh, that's really true. Right? You knew it was true already. Intellectually you already knew, but there's some added weight and resonance. And so that's what you're looking for when trying to move from analytical on a concept to single-pointed on a concept, is that feeling of resonance, of getting it, of, we say the penny drops, I don't know, the shekel drops, right, the penny drops. Right. It has the ring of truth, we say. There's something more than just your intellectual mind. So if that doesn't happen, don't worry about it, just keep it in analysis until it does. But probably so far it's just been an interesting moment in analytical meditations that occurred sort of spontaneously, where you're like, oh yeah. Right. Yeah. Now you're trying to make that, oh yeah, feeling, and then stay. And basically you stay there for like 20 seconds, 30 seconds, and then just like the breath or anything else, you think, that reminds me, and you go off on all sorts of tangents, in which case you just say, what I found to be true was, and you do a very brief analysis just to wake back up that resonance. So rather than going through the whole process again or starting from the beginning, you just kind of go back to the key points until you feel that heart connection again. So this is the sort of meditation you only do with a concept that's very familiar. Yeah, until the concept's very familiar, you keep it in analysis. Yeah, and this idea of going through the processes of hearing, meaning study, then contemplation, reflection, debate, discussion, and then meditation is something that is true all through the path. And then once you've meditated on it, you go back to study, reflection, meditation, study, reflection, meditation, just cycles and cycles on the same topic, and each time it goes more and more deeply. Yeah. But yeah, that's the new piece, and it's not often explicitly signposted as, okay, now stay there. You're like, okay. Right? So if it's not resonating, don't worry about it, keep it in analysis. So it relates to this idea of objects for purifying behavior, which was kind of the preamble to which I was talking about last session, kind of picking out your unfortunate favorites. Yes, your unfortunate favorites, which behaviors need purifying the most obviously in your life so far. Not to worry, there's an antidote for each of them. Yes, but I guess this all relies on the fact that you've done some prior study on what these afflictions are, so that you don't fall into the mistake of thinking, here are all the ways that I'm bad, okay? It's more like, here are all the potentials to ruin my mental health. Here are all the habits that could steal my peace. Here are the innate tendencies that all sentient beings have. They are universal problems. They are not unique to you. Don't worry about it. It's just naming them, identifying them, then you can start to work with them. If you feel too much shame or identification or defensiveness, you can't work with them because you're too strongly identified with them. It feels like you're chopping out pieces of yourself. So you need enough mental space to say, these arise within my mind because of countless causes and conditions, namely ignorance and self-cherishing. They're not me. They're removable. Yeah, other questions from the last session or just in general?
I don't know if I have a question, but maybe an observation. Well, I feel attached, of course. And when I feel attached, I see the attachment and I see the pros and cons of the things. I see that it's not really, I'm projecting too much. And then I look at it and I say, okay, I'm with it. I'm not just pushing it out because I'm not a monk. I'm a lay person, right? So I just try to see the whole picture. Not too much, not too less, just as much as I can. I'm not the same, but I'm trying to be as much as more equilibration, how do you say that?
Like equilibrium or equanimity, yeah.
Be more in the middle, not to be too far, too close to the things.
So you're feeling like even the premise that these are to be removed is too soon. Right now you're just trying to have a better relationship with them.
Just to see the whole picture. Trying to see the whole picture, not to be one-sided. It's not hell to be with attachment to my children. It's not that I have to be very far from them. I just have to see how can I help them and how can I be in service. For example, to my children, to my wife, to my business, to my workers. I'm attached to my work.
Of course, yeah.
I need it.
Yeah.
I can stay without money and just say, okay,
No, but you're falling into the trap of thinking that externally things have to change. Nothing has to change externally. You can stay in a romantic relationship. You can very much care about your children. You can be invested in the lives of your workers. You can be very much invested in this world. But the detachment actually gives you more freedom for real love. Attachment is killing your love. It just doesn't feel like it when everything's going well. It's when things don't go well, when there's something that is dissonant with your attachment, that then you have pain and grief and rage and disappointment and all of these negative emotions, which make life all about you and make it very hard for these people you love to get the best of you. It shuts down your heart. So you're not pretending that you don't have attachment. I think what you're saying is really important, that we don't want to pretend that we don't have attachment, or that just by thinking of these we can just get rid of it or something. We have to change our relationship to attachment before we can actually get rid of it. There's intermediate steps, absolutely, of working with the fact that we have it while trying to get rid of it. But I feel like the part that's missing is your mind saying, and I need to get rid of it. Part of you still likes it. It sounds like.
I like what?
You like the attachment.
I think that if we make the
Well, I
voice...
think I like it. I like my children and I really want to make it work with them. So I'm really trying to be in service.
And so the problem is that you're giving the credit for your feeling to something that isn't why you have that feeling. Your feeling is coming from something different than the story of your attachment. So what you like is warmth and connection and all of those bonds and all of that warmth that comes with love. Right, all of that is totally fine. That is not attachment. But attachment will use those warm feelings and will use that sense of responsibility and connection and co-opt it. Like steal it and say, they are the reason for all of your feelings that are warm and good. Therefore, if they are gone, you can't feel that way anymore. They are what gave you that feeling. And then if they behave in a way that you don't like, they're taking that feeling from you. You're giving all of the power to the outside world. So you have to find the difference between what is the part that is love and what is the part that is attachment, because they take turns and they're towards the same object. And attachment feels like love when everything is going well. But you know when it's love or attachment based on hard times. So if your children do something you don't like that's really bad, say they broke the law or something, if your first thought is, oh, what's wrong? It was love. If your first thought is, what is wrong with you? It was attachment, right? So you don't know until something goes wrong sometimes, because attachment and love look very similar on a good day. Yeah.
I think what you're pointing out, that it's really to be just in presence with
Yeah.
the children, to be with them. For example, the children, and it's other things too, to be with the thing, to see that I'm not too much into it, and just to give the light to the situation.
Yeah. So attachment doesn't mean anything has to change in your life outside.
Because what I understood from the meditation, that I should be off detachment, completely not detached, which...
Yeah, try, right? But you know you're not there, right? So I feel like the problem that happens is that we have these meditations and teachings which describe the best case, and we know we can't possibly be the best case today in this moment, so then it feels like, oh, that's not for me. And actually the lesson is, this is an aspiration. This is like a goal to work towards. It's a training, and if you could already do it perfectly the first meditation, you wouldn't need it in the first place. So you have to think of it as a training of, can I experiment with what it would be like to let go in this way? Can I experiment with what it would be like to allow creativity and freedom back into my heart and not suffocate it with attachment and all its expectations? Because you've had moments where you've had very beautiful, pure love as an ordinary person. You have, I know you. You're a very loving person. So you contrast that best of you with when it's collapsed into attachment and the way it's ruined the very things that you love. And so you're seeing there is a real disadvantage to allowing attachment to go as it has been. There's a real disadvantage in my daily life contentment and happiness and ability to be there for others. But I'm not going to be perfect. So definitely I'm just working on my relationship to it right now. I'm not immediately saying, okay, no more of all of the things I'm attached to. But you're just gently starting to adjust your relationships. So it's not like an addiction where you go cold turkey, yes? You know, cold turkey? Where like you're smoking and you decide I'm going to quit smoking and you just stop smoking that day and you never smoke again and you have weeks of being horrible to live with and all of your friends are like, please keep smoking, right? It's not like that with attachment, right?
Exactly.
Right?
4 months without smoking.
Now you're fine, but you were horrible for a while.
Oh, I'm horrible now too.
It's not necessarily, also you said it, it doesn't have to do with external thing, it's your behavior too.
Yeah.
It's the voices, it says, you have to be that way in order for me to love you with a person. Or I have to have this thing in order to be happy. You learn to identify the voices. It doesn't have to do with the external world.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So don't feel like a pushing attitude, or like what can also happen with attachment is that you start to feel deprivation mentality. Like you start to feel like you have to give up things that you need for your happiness, and it creates some sort of panic. And sometimes you actually get more attached as the result of your working on attachment, because you're panicked. You think, but I need these. This is what I need for happiness. You know, and so then you eat more chocolate cake and you have more relationships and you get into more dramas with your friends because you're getting more clingy. And that can happen if you're not really clear with how it hurts you. Yeah, there's no need to get rid of something that doesn't hurt you. But the problem is that we don't really believe attachment is hurting us.
So it's being attached to detachment.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like it's easy to see how anger doesn't help. Yeah, exactly. And the relationship between attachment and anger is not so clear. But we know that anger hurts us. Yes? Like sometimes we say anger protects me, or it makes me assertive, or it makes me passionate, or some sort of nonsense. But really at our heart of hearts, we know that anger hurts us. You know, we know that it can make us sick, that it can make us stressed, that it makes us ruin relationships, etc., etc. We know anger is not so good. And the way in which anger makes your body feel is uncomfortable, right? When you're really angry, you might feel strong or you might feel vital, but you also feel agitated and maybe too hot or too cold, right?
The after part is terrible.
Right, the after party is really terrible. So if you can remember how much anger is no good, then you can think about attachment and anger are actually very good friends. When attachment doesn't get what it wants, anger comes right in its space immediately. Yeah. It says, "How dare you take my joy, you computer that won't update quick enough." Right? You took my joy. Yeah, Betty.
Mary, can you?
At the beginning of our meeting, you said something that seems to me now the most important thing is that what supports compassion, like the right hand of compassion or the possibility to feel compassion, is ethics.
Yeah.
Now, back to the thoughts that I had over this meeting is that it's tricky and it could be a trap if we talk about, yes, if we get let go, attachment, we work on it, we will be happier. Wanting to be happy
Is a problem.
is the attachment
Yeah.
we could ever imagine.
Yeah.
So what would motivate us? We are human beings. We are very, very trapped into attachment. Ethics.
Yeah.
Because ethics is like, could I search getting let go and not feel attachment for its own sake? Because it's good for everybody.
Yeah.
The result of that would be that I will be happy, but
Yeah.
that's not my target. Am I right?
Yeah, and it's a very important point to think, oh, I'll have more happiness if I have less afflictions, so that's my reason for getting rid of afflictions. It totally could be a trap, but you're thinking, my afflictions harm myself, they harm others, there's a greater purpose to overcoming them than just my immediate satisfaction. The basis being ethics is absolutely the profound thing. And when we say ethics or morality in Buddhism, we mean non-harmfulness, right? Non-harmfulness. Sort of an active, passive. It sounds like a contradiction, right? You're actively non-harming, which means you're very attentive to the things that might harm. You're very attentive to noticing if attachment is co-opting your love or taking over your love. You're very much understanding that your energy and your sort of goals towards enlightenment can be taken over by things like pride and jealousy. And all of those things harm you and harm your relationship and harm your progress on the path. Absolutely. So this like foundation of ethics, I think to make it feel like you don't have to wait forever for the happiness to come, the immediate sort of samsaric mind can be settled by remembering that when you're doing the right thing, you're a lot calmer. So there's like a baseline contentment. Calmer, yeah. There's a baseline contentment that your mind has when you're not struggling with your ethics. And that is like a type of joy. It's not like excited going to the theme park, being on the roller coaster sort of joy, excitement. It's like that deep contentment that's so steady. Yeah, nothing to prove, nothing to explain, nothing to justify, no need for excuses, just I'm living in alignment with non-harmfulness. There's a great peace in that, which happens immediately, you know. And then everything else is like a bonus, you know. So if that helps the samsaric mind, remember, ethics makes you steady. Yeah. Helps everything. So, you know, sometimes we need to have the immediate benefit in our mind to be motivated, not pretend that that's otherwise. The immediate benefit of peace, of relaxation, of those things. But if you can consciously expand it, then you're not so impatient about your own progress. Because the spiritual path is long and there are many chapters, and some of them are inspiring and energizing and full of joy and wonder and awe and all the kind of like magic. And some parts of the spiritual path are what many religions would call like the dark night of the soul, where you're just struggling with your own demons, trying to understand how you got this way, how to untangle yourself, how to find some sort of momentum and discipline with this beautiful thing that you love, but you have a complicated relationship with. Your own spiritual path, it's like a relationship. And there's fun chapters and not so fun chapters. But the baseline can stay contentment if you're in that ethical mode. Yeah, you keep that consistent steadiness where, oh, this is a hard day, but I have a deep satisfaction despite of my stress or despite my worries. I have a deep satisfaction of being in alignment with ethics. Does it make sense?
Very much.
Yeah. Easier said than done, but yeah. And it's why we have all of these vows, right? They're promises to do things we already think are important. So refuge vows of lay people, like if we just very much focused on not killing, just one of the 5 vows, never mind all 5. I mean, life could change so dramatically. Just be in this mode of non-harmfulness towards life. Or not stealing, and you think, I don't steal. I don't even take pens from work. But if you're focusing on, I will not take what hasn't been freely offered, in a very expansive way, like not time that hasn't been freely offered, not space that hasn't been freely offered, yeah, not, sort of energy and attention from people that's obviously not been offered, really expansive awareness of, I will not take what belongs to others. I will not take it for granted. I will not forget to return the things I've borrowed, really expansive. There's a really deep happiness that comes from living in that way. But also a real fearlessness that comes with ethics, where you can sort of be happy to be seen transparently. You have nothing to hide. It's really much more comfortable to live in ethics. People can walk in the middle of your life and you don't feel ashamed. That feeling? Like maybe you're in your pajamas and that's embarrassing, but otherwise, right? Yeah, so ethics is really the key. It's the key to concentration, but it's the key to the whole path in terms of stability and momentum. So we never want to overlook that. But, if your relationship with ethics is complicated and your attachment somehow pulls you off of your ethics, which is very common, to know that, right? And not to feel bad about yourself because of it, because everything we're talking about is a training. So the assumption with the training is that you're not good at it, right? But also that you can be. Both things, right? So you wouldn't need to train in it if you were good at it already, right? But there would be no reason to train in it if you couldn't get better at it. So the mind is trainable, the heart is trainable. Like, you're having confidence in your own ability to develop, like self-directed evolution. Does it make sense? So all of this should give you even more compassion for others, because when you recognize the struggle of working with your own mind's negative habits, the first thing that happens is you start to project and look outward and see everyone else's faults even more clearly and get really judgmental because you're embarrassed at what you've seen about yourself. But after you get past that judgmental stage of, I'm not the only one that loses my temper, you say, oh, right. Suffering is what drives bad behavior. Ignorance is what drives bad behavior. And I know that deeply because I've been looking at myself. Before I was looking at myself, I just wondered what was wrong with people. Why are you like this? Can you stop it? When you know yourself very deeply, Vladimir Putin makes sense. Yeah? And so does Trump, and so does all of the characters in the life who we actually have no idea who they are. They could be Buddhas, they could be demons, that we don't know who they are really, because we can't take anyone else's measure for sure. But we can look at the behaviors we don't like and understand how we do the same thing in our own polite version. Yeah? With the less, power economically or less power politically, the tiny versions of those we have in ourselves in certain situations.
Very polite.
Very polite. Still problematic.
Still very painful, though.
Yeah.
You say it makes sense, but it doesn't make sense.
What part?
All these innocent people that keep getting killed, and it's very painful.
I don't think they have the self-reflection. I don't know.
I just read something about there's a lot of Russian soldiers. Yeah, actually they're Buddhists. And they come from like nowheres, you know, in Russia, and they get killed, a lot of them. So they're doing some kind of Buddhist funerals for them. So there was a talk about this, and like what's Buddhist about it, or how does it happen, and to make sense. It's very hard to make sense. Very painful. It's so painful sometimes that like I can't breathe.
So summarize the sense.
Well, and I'm with you, and I guess the difference between empathic distress and compassion is huge.
Right.
You know, empathic distress, you're relating to their suffering, you're seeing their suffering, and you are suffering with them. And it's a tender, beautiful heart that does that, but it's not compassion. Compassion is seeing all of that suffering at the same time as holding awareness of their freedom potential, right? They have the potential to be free of their suffering, whether it's mentally or physically or situationally or in future lives. Their destiny is not to suffer this way forever. It's not some sort of fate or punishment. This is not the essence of what these people have to bear. But right now what they're bearing is horrible. And so I think it can help us to look at the micro version of how we are making these same kind of choices as these world leaders we disagree with. Because it's on a spectrum, right? So like the way we approach zoning, you know, or the way we approach property development, for example. How is that on a spectrum of I'm going to invade and take over and build over the top of, right? How is even just something as simple as, I was thinking about in where I used to live in Australia, there was all of these annoyances with the neighbors about where the boundary line was, because the fence was just a few inches over into their boundary. And it's not like they're using those several inches, but there was so much resentment that our fence was taking over a few inches of their boundary. Oh my goodness. And then, of course, the hardship of us needing to like uproot the fence and put it where it should be, even though we weren't the ones that put it there in the first place. We just inherited this mess. Maybe you can relate, right? Right. Nevertheless, it was important to them. Nevertheless, it was their boundary. So even though it was a great inconvenience to us and a lot of expense, we thought, all right, let's fundraise to move the fence. Yeah. It would be wonderful if there just was no fence, but since some people feel safer with fences, we'll put it where they want it to be. Because does it really matter to us being, you know, convenienced? So remembering the spectrum of behaviors, you know, sometimes if we've experienced terrible trauma and we can't relate to the person who abused, and we think, how would they do that? Why would they do that? I would never do that. Think of the micro version that you do. Maybe it's only to animals, maybe it's only in traffic, maybe it's only in a certain context, but there is something in you that is on the same spectrum, which is why when you move your mind to these behaviors, it's an act of peace. It's an act of world peace. Because rather than just taking for granted the fact that you're nice people, you're proactively growing your heart. Right? Which is a radical thing to do. It's the best kind of activism, because it means then any outside behaviors you actually do aren't tainted by afflictions in the same way. Right? How many activist things that are very good causes also have all sorts of anger, right? All sorts of anger, all sorts of pride, all sorts of looking down at the other side, no sense of collaboration or listening or sharing. It's just, you are wrong, I am right, I'm going to yell over the top of you, or do something fancy to show you how stupid you are. Like, it's not healthy. So all of these are acts of peace, and they are harder and take longer than the quick methods of suppression and dominance, but they last longer, and they don't have a back effect that's bad. Right? There's no whiplash from these. If you do something to win against some oppressor that's horrible to you, and you do some dominating action of suppression, it might work for a moment. And then what? right? It bleeds out somewhere else and hurts someone else, even if not you, or it comes back around. Like, you're not ending the violent energy, but these behaviors snuff it of fuel, right? So then the violence ends here, rather than you just passing the violence on to someone else and everyone's just throwing the ball of violence around the world and it's endless. So it's kind of like, in a way, respect your practice so much more than just, this is something I do when I have time, or this is something I do when I'm kind of interested in it. It's a radical, profound act to work for inner peace. Yeah, and it's very easy for us who are polite and well-mannered and wouldn't harm a fly to sort of say, that's enough. I'm a good person. Yeah, I'm nice to my neighbors. When they're sad, I bring them food. We could actually go much more deeply than that. And when we go more deeply than that, it invites depth from the people in our life. We don't have to say it, and probably we shouldn't say it, but just your being has a better influence on people around you. You become a stronger condition to bring the best out of people. Do you know that feeling of like when you are with a group of people and you can tell in that moment you're the one setting the tone? Sometimes you're not the one setting the tone. There's a more dominant person in the group of friends, but sometimes you're the friend that is setting the tone of the conversation or the dynamic. And when that's the case, do you elevate it, or do you keep it where it's at, or do you drag it down? You know? Is it like, okay, now that we're all together, let's gossip, right? Now that we're all together, let's play video games that are about killing. Or is it, now that we're all together, how do we collaborate to support each other in the various things going on in our lives? You know? And if there's opportunity, talk about ideas and ways for peace and all of these things. But even if it's just as simple as, when I'm the tone setter, the people know that we can talk about our issues and problems in a compassionate way and come to solutions together. And that we're not going to just pick at each other and gossip about the world and rant about politics and talk about how the world's going to hell and eat ourselves silly and get drunk and pass out.
That sounds fun.
But I feel like we've done it enough, right? We've done it enough. So these things are simple on the surface in terms of intelligence, you can understand. But in terms of the significance in your life, it is a brave thing to not just stay as you are. And I guess it helps to remember that unless we're working on it, our brain is, going to kind of go into a slightly dementia, Alzheimer-y, forgetfulness kind of default mode. And we might actually get worse when we get older if we don't really become proactive right now as we are. I was thinking about how my grandparents are gradually dying, and when my grandmother was about 70, she was at her best. Really, she was at her best. She was at her most compassionate, her most kind, her most steady, her most expansive. And then after 70, she declined and was as bad as she was in my early childhood in terms of critical and reactive and judgmental and angry and all of those things that she'd kind of grown out of over her adult life. She reverted back. Yeah, she kind of got to a peak and then slid. And what we want to do is get to our peak and stay there, all the way to our death, and then in our next life, pick up where we left off and keep growing. Right? Wouldn't it be horrible if you put all of this work into becoming a deeper, kinder person, and then you had dementia and just yelled at everyone for the last 20 years of your life? It's so poignant, right? It's heartbreaking. But you put so much good work in, you don't want to lose the momentum. So it's going to require more and more intention. Just like as you get older, it takes more and more intention to stay healthy, right? To have your body have the same level of vitality that it did before takes a lot more effort than it used to. Same, the mind will, but that effort is not wasted. That's all good karma or merit. This is momentum for our path. So none of it's lost. Questions? Ready for more? Yeah? So for strong desire, The antidote is ugliness. Okay, this is a strange, yes, exactly. It's totally strange framing, and it doesn't sound very Buddhist. What you're doing is recognizing that when you have strong desire or attachment in general, you're exaggerating the good. You're seeing the good isolated from the whole story. Or you're thinking that the good of something or someone comes from its own side, separated from context, right? You're thinking that the tiny story of the fun part is the whole story. So what you're trying to do is to see the whole story of a person, an object, or a situation by remembering the bad stuff on purpose. Because you're trying to break the spell. So if someone, like you take physical attachment and you think, oh, they're so beautiful, they're so cute, they're so handsome, like just a few inches away is poop, right? At any time. Not just poop, right? Right? Like it's disgusting and it's weird and why would you do that? That's so bizarre. But, you know, when you're in the throes of attachment, like not like settled attachment when you're in a nice long-term relationship, right? But like new attachment, sometimes you're even like, the smell of their armpits is beautiful. The smell of their breath in the morning is wonderful. Everything they do is cute. I love everything. You can get weird, right? You know, in the like new attachment. So to break the spell, you have to consciously think of the things that you cannot make appealing no matter how attached you are, like poo, right? You're like, there's no way to make that feel appealing. You're like, no, but it's compost for the garden. You know, no. It's hard to make that seem appealing, yes. It can help break the spell. You can think about actually when they're with their brother, they totally ignore me and it hurts my feelings. Actually, when they're at work, they get into a really aggressive, ambitious, arrogant state, and I don't really like them when they're like that. You're remembering on purpose the things you don't like, not to then go into aversion and say, well, I don't like you at all now, never mind. You're trying to balance. So, of course, if you have huge aversion towards someone, you do the opposite, and you think, what is beautiful about them? What is interesting about them? What is supportive about them? What do I appreciate about them? The idea in both of these is that attachment and aversion exaggerate. So you're trying to come back to reality. Does it make sense?
But
so you're
can't you use? I mean, it sounds kind of immature.
Totally.
The
Yeah,
strategy.
totally. Yeah, totally.
Can't you do it just like
Like
view this person or this object that you're attached to just more realistically?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. But we're talking
Pour a
about
lot of realism on it. And then
exactly.
less fantasy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's sort of like for 14-year-old attachment, right? 14-year-olds.
Which is
right?
fine because our attachment is sometimes like
We all
it
Yeah.
acts like a
Yeah.
14-year-old.
Yeah, we're all 14.
3-year-old sometimes.
Right. Right, but it is sort of childish and basic, but we're talking about thoughts that break the spell, right? Attachments like being under a spell. And usually the spell gets broken by reality, right? You're only able to live in that bubble of attachment for so long, and then eventually you see more about the person, you understand more about the person, and if you have genuine love as the basis, you think, I accept them, all of their warts and all, right? I accept them as they are, the good and the bad. I hope they get better at that one thing, but anyway, I love them, it's fine, right? Like that's a mature relationship. When the attachment starts to settle, you're able to maintain love even when seeing more of the picture. But what often happens is that once you see more of the picture of the person, you're angry at them. Like they lied to you by saying they were this good version. How dare you lie to me and say that you were beautiful and perfect all the time? And they're saying, I didn't say that. You just only saw me during the day, right? If you see me early in the morning, not so good. I never said I was otherwise. But you feel like you've been lied to. That's the problem of attachment. It fixes the story in one time and place and moment when you like them the best, or you like the situation the best, or the object the best. And anything that's outside of that very concrete story feels like they're lying to you, and you're so mad about it. Feels like they're disappointing you or they're letting you down. You know, we get this with inanimate objects. Like, why aren't you going as fast as yesterday? Go faster.
Well,
Right?
Why aren't you making me happy?
Exactly.
This used to make me happy.
Exactly. The happiness. Give me the happiness, right? Come on. Come on. You know, yesterday you were giving me the
That
happiness.
sounds like
Right.
not understanding impermanence
Also,
more than, or not understanding emptiness.
also,
I don't know if just thinking about positive attributes or negative attributes is enough in some cases, because like, for example, I had a conversation with my friend, she has a crush on someone, and I said, he poops sometimes. She's like, that doesn't help, I still think he's cute. She's keeping a
And it's not about making her
Yeah.
think that he's not cute. Just
there's more than just the cute.
Yes.
Yes, there's more
it's
than the
not
cute.
the source of your
There is
happiness.
cute in a cuteness.
Yeah.
And so, you know, these are from the traditional texts, right?
Okay.
But it's not the only method. But we're talking about things
it's the
for...
most effective method.
It's talking about an initial method, right? So there are deeper methods like remembering impermanence, like remembering emptiness, like patience, like love. Those are more sophisticated, and they're absolutely listed. But when we're talking about surface ways to purify behavior, like neediness and craving and demandingness and entitlement that comes together with your attachment, you need a quick way to break the spell, and that's thinking about the ugly side.
So that's talking about it to do it in meditation or not necessarily?
Both. Yeah, in meditation specifically, but then in life,
then just
yeah. And not go too
habitual
far,
life.
right? But of course, you know, when you're trying to get through desire, you're also remembering love, patience, impermanence, emptiness, of course. But here we're talking about kind of ways to interrupt the behavior that flows from attachment. Yeah. And some of the behaviors that flow from attachment are so hungry, they're so kind of panicked and needy that you kind of need something to repel. So it doesn't have to be poo, right? It can be anything like that time I saw them at work and they were so rude. That really ruins my picture of them, my attachment picture of them. I don't like seeing them like that. That is a really unappealing characteristic. And then you have a breath and you stop chasing. Do you know that chasing quality of attachment, that hungry chasing, you must come here, I need you in this way, that is not healthy, and you want something to interrupt that, to repel instead of pull. Yeah. Because all the time in the day, our mind is going back and forth between attachment and aversion for the most part. This is too much, this is not enough. This is too much, this is not enough. Too much, not enough. Too much, not enough. And the mind is pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling back and forth all day. And that is why we're stressed. Yes? We wouldn't need to sleep so much, or we wouldn't have such a craving for sleep if we weren't wearing ourselves out during the day with this push and pull. Yeah. Do you feel how it's tiring? That in the back of your mind there's a little bit of, oh, this is too much. Oh, this is not enough. Yeah, push-pull all the time, even just quietly in the background. Wears us out. So just having some time where you say, in this meditation, I'm going to really consciously remember on purpose the negative side of the things I cling to open up the full picture for myself. Yeah. But also use whatever methods work. It's just
Could
one.
you describe just like an example of a meditation using, like going through this?
The traditional one you can
Kind of
do.
like what we did?
Yeah, kind of like what we did. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's
classic.
the charnel ground. Yeah. So you think, okay, going through the skin, yucky, yucky, yucky. Going through the bones, gross, that's disgusting. Going into the internal organs, very squishy and smelly. Okay, just all of that is unfortunate.
And I'm
Right.
And then stay
Right.
at it, like single pointedly?
You're just trying to like feel that sense of, I don't need to chase this. This isn't the source of the happiness. Because of course, when you're in a loving atmosphere, if someone has like a bathroom accident or a cut on their arm or something, you want to hold all of that grossness with love, like parents do, but also just for our friends. We want to be able to see all of the things that we would meditate here as not so repulsive. It's all about timing. Yeah, it's when you do this. You're doing this for a specific purpose. So it is like the charnel ground meditation where you're thinking about gradually going through the different layers of the body and going, ugh, right? It helps. But if that doesn't help, you can also go through and think, here are their good qualities, which I go over way too often in my mind. Here are the negative qualities. And if I can't remember their negative qualities because I don't know them well enough yet, I can think of the negative effect on my mind of being so narrowly focused, the way I forget everyone else under the influence of this attachment. So maybe this person is as good as your attachment says, or it's too soon for you to see the big picture of them. You can see what it does to you to have attachment. Because all of the point of this is to see how these afflictions are the problem. It's never about the person themselves. You're just using this one instance where you've been triggered as your example. And you think, when I have attachment, I don't call my mother, I don't clean the house, I forget about certain responsibilities at work, when friends need me, I ignore them, whatever you do, right? But somehow your vision becomes very narrow when you're attached. Even if it's just an object that you want and you're saving up money for and you become obsessed with, you know, you're talking about it to your friends all the time and they're saying, we do not care about this new computer as much as you do. We're glad that you're interested and that you're saving up for it, enjoy it, but shut up already, we don't care as much as you. You know, there's an insensitivity that comes when your mind is attached. So even if you just think of the negative aspect of attachment itself. So there's a lot of angles for all of these afflictions. These are just some options, but there's lots. There's lots. So then for strong anger, single-pointed concentration is one of the remedies, and then looking at love and patience also. So the patience section in the stages of the path is an amazing section because it's talking about how the wish to harm is often justified in our mind with something that feels like logic. But the logic is flawed, and it's always flawed. The wish to harm is always coming from a mistaken idea. And so you're just gently and decisively noticing how problematic your thinking is when you justify your anger. But if that's not something that works for you, you can just look at love or look at single-pointed concentration. And the advice is when you're in the throes of anger, like when it's really in your mind and you're boiling mad, is actually don't use too much analysis until you settle down a little bit. When you're in the middle of the anger, watch the breath. And if the breath isn't a good idea, watch like a meditated image of the Buddha or light, but just something gentle and single-pointed until you settle down. And then you can bring in analytical ideas about love or about patience. For all of these, remembering emptiness helps, but only if you've studied about emptiness and understand that it means the lack of inherent existence because things dependently arise, and that all makes some sort of sense to you. That is going to help any of these. But you have to study it a fair amount for that to be the way to just cut through all of it. So it depends on where you're at. With confusion, of course, wisdom, but in the text it says, meditate on the 12 links of dependent arising. So you're going through the sequence of how samsara is developed and how samsara can be interrupted. And that can help you with that.
What do you mean confusion? Confusion about what?
In general?
Ignorance.
Ignorance, yeah. Ignorance. Yeah, in this text they're calling it confusion, but we could say ignorance. So of course, wisdom realizing emptiness, yes, but dependent arising, specifically the 12 links, also. So you're noticing the way ignorance leads to karma, and the way karma leads to planting seeds on the consciousness, and the way that whole cycle goes can help you find points where you can interrupt the process. Then for conceit, which is their way of phrasing pride, you analyze on the aggregates, which is interesting. Also on dependent arising, but the aggregates, form, feeling, consciousness, compositional factors, discrimination. What you're looking at particularly is things like the body, the way everything relates to one another. It's basically some sort of process of humbling yourself a little bit. You know, what in the Bible it would say, you are dust, man, and to dust you shall return, right? It's a little bit like that kind of humbling, but not to look down on yourself at all, right? So you're just kind of analyzing the different components and seeing that, one, you're not so fancy, two, you're dependently arisen. Yeah. It just kind of settles you down. Yeah.
You look like we're all,
Yeah, exactly. You x-ray us all, we all look pretty much the same. You know, it just kind of brings down your arrogance. And then distraction, the breath. So that's why we use breath meditation. Even if we're not doing a meditation on the breath, we do it for a couple of minutes before anything else, because that's what helps surface distractions settle. Okay. So after lunch, we'll do a couple of meditations. Do you have any requests related to these, or do you want me to surprise you?
Anger.
Anger? Anger.
Huh?
Huh?
One surprise, one anger.
One surprise, one anger. Okay. Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so we'll have a break for an hour, and then we'll do some more Q&A and then just meditations.